Hello, I'm Ollie. This is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, none of that. It's another library tour, and it's a tour of some of my young adult and kids books. So yes, obviously I don't often talk about children's books on the channel, although I have spoken a few times about the series of Unfortunate Events books by Lemony Snicket. But yeah, this box that I have pulled down from the attic has all kids or YA books in it. Not a huge number of books in this one, so it won't be a very long video, but let me dive into it and let me know what's in here. These are all books that I have read, I should say, as well. So I'm just going to grab a few and see what we get. So first up, Boy by Roald Dahl, so the first part of his autobiography. So this was great. I really like, Dahl's great anyway, obviously. His children's books are great. His adult kind of horror short stories are even better. And this was a very entertaining kind of account of his childhood. So yeah, if you fancy learning more about what formed Roald Dahl, if you like, this is definitely worth reading. I've got the sequel to it going solo somewhere as well, which is about his kind of life as a young man. Next up, a book that probably needs no introduction, rightly so, Holes by Louis Sachar. I don't know how you pronounce that name, actually, to be honest with you, but anyway, this is fantastic. So if you've not read it, it's a wonderful children's book that's really, it's complex without being complicated, in that it's got loads of different threads going on. But they are all woven together beautifully. So about a kind of young offenders institution, I suppose you would say, where the kids are forced to dig holes for reasons that become apparent as the book goes on. So they kind of get put on a chain gang and have to dig these holes, which have to be, I think, a spade's length apart from each other and a spade's length in diameter. But yeah, very funny, quite exciting, just a wonderful, wonderful kids book. Next up, a bit of YA, so Elena and Park by Rowell. So I really enjoyed this. I read this, I guess, about 4 or 5 years ago. It's a romance about a relationship between two kind of slightly outcast, or two teenagers who are outcasts in their school, should we say. Park is, I think, of Korean heritage, and Eleanor is the new girl in town. But yeah, it's a very sweet, quite charming book. I've subsequently read a few kind of critiques of it that suggest that its handling of race is not great, and that it falls into a number of kind of stereotypes of Oriental people. I have to say, when I read it, I didn't notice that, but I can believe it's true. I'd have to reread it to confirm that, but I thought it was a sweet and quite affecting romance. It's got a lovely ending as well, brilliant ending. Next up, a book I've definitely read, but I can't remember anything about this. So Caraval by Stephani Garber. I don't even know why I read this. I think it's a sort of magical realist type YA book about a carnival or something like that. And I'm guessing a young girl who goes to the carnival and gets whisked off to a magical world, that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't really remember it. Right, next up, another very well-known one. So Wonder by RJ Palacio, which I thought was fantastic. So if you don't know, it's about a young boy who's got kind of facial deformity, and just about his experiences, really. It's written from the perspective of a number of different characters, which works beautifully. It's very moving, very sweet. Definitely recommended if you haven't read it already. Next up, another YA one, so Deathless Divide by Justina, which is the sequel to her book, which was called, what was the first called? Dread Nation. These are really fun. I enjoyed both of these books. So they are it's kind of an alternative history with zombies, where basically I'm trying to remember, after the American Civil War, the dead of the Civil War dead rise up again and become zombies, and black teenagers in the States are trained to protect the kind of white upper classes, and it's about a girl whose name I forget, who does that job. So she's like kick-ass fighter. So she goes up against zombies and stuff like that, which is great fun. But there's also a load of social commentary and, you know, commentary about race and, you know, the treatment of black people in America. So yeah, a really enjoyable, fun, but also quite serious couple of YA novels. This being the second of the series. I'm not sure if there's any more yet or not. Right, I did mention a series of unfortunate events earlier. So here we have book 10, The Slippery Slope, which was, you know, much like the other ones, very entertaining, very silly, wonderful kind of wordplay and things like that in these books. So about a trio of orphans who are stalked by this awful character, Count Olaf, who's trying to get their fortune, whilst they are trying to find out what happened to their parents. So yeah, a very entertaining series. This one is a absolute favourite from my childhood, Swallows and Amazons by Arthur Ransom. So I loved these books when I was a kid. So I don't know when they were written, in the 40s maybe? I don't know, I will find out. Oh no, 1930. I'm peering over my glasses because I'm so old. Yeah, so written in the 30s, about these kids who basically go on holiday to the lakes in Yorkshire, and go sailing on the lake and have adventures. So yeah, they're really lovely books. And he makes, you know, there's like 10 books in the series or something like that. So he manages to make a fair bit out of them. Something different in every one. My favourite was probably one called We Didn't Mean to Go to Sea, which is where they end up accidentally going to sea and having to like battle the elements and stuff like that to get back to safety. It's kind of, I've always thought, the prototype for the movie Space Camp, which is where the same thing happens with some kids in America, but they end up in the space shuttle in space. So slightly more exciting. Although I have to say, We Didn't Mean to Go to Sea was very exciting. But yeah, these are wonderful kind of British kids books. Something completely different next. So Forbidden by Tabatha Suzuma, which is a YA romance novel about a romance between a brother and sister, hence the title Forbidden, which was actually quite subtly and sensitively done, and very moving, as sad as well. As you can probably guess, it doesn't end well, but yeah, a memorable and quite moving book. Next up, a very famous one, so Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. So I really enjoyed this, but I started reading the second one, whatever the second one's called, and I couldn't get into it at all. This is, what's this called in the States? The Golden Compass, I think this is in the States. So yeah, I thought this was wonderfully imaginative, really exciting, but yeah, for some reason I couldn't get into the second book, so I have got a copy of that somewhere, so I'll have to pick that up at some point and give it another try. Okay, next up, another YA one, and another one that I think has incest themes in it, bizarrely. I think there's a relationship between cousins in this one. So How I Live Now by Meg Rosoff, which is I think, if I remember rightly, and it's ages since I read this, I think it's kind of dystopian. I think it's set in the future in a like a sort of semi-post-apocalyptic kind of environment. I remember it being very good, but I'm afraid I don't remember much more about it than that. Although it's got a very kind of YA type of a cover, hasn't it? But quite a nicely done one. Okay, moving on. Oh, this was a favourite from my childhood. I actually bought this as an adult just because I loved it so much as a kid. Henry Hollins and the Dinosaur by Willis Hall, which is about a young kid who, I remember it so well, even though I haven't read it for like 40 years, who goes to the seaside with his parents and finds an egg, a big egg at the seaside, which he manages to smuggle back home with him somehow. And he puts it in the airing cupboard, and lo and behold, it hatches, and it's a dinosaur who becomes his pal. And they, as you can see, have adventures and get chased by helicopters and things. But yeah, I just remember absolutely loving it as a kid. Like most kids, I thought dinosaurs were brilliant. And this was, a book about a young kid who wasn't that different from me, who had his own dinosaur. Brilliant stuff. A classic next, Call of the Wild by Jack London. So it needs no introduction, but yeah, a fantastically exciting novel of survival. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I read it a good few years ago now, but I do remember thinking it was excellent. Another famous kids book, Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Paterson, which is, God, one of the saddest things I've ever read. If you haven't read this and you don't know the twist, you need to read it before someone spoils the twist for you. It's just a gut wrencher. It's almost up there with something like A Little Life. I mean, not quite, but it really does pack an emotional punch. We watched the movie of this. So before I read the book, I watched the movie of it with my son, not knowing the twist. And he was not very old. He was like 7 or 8. And it starts off as a kind of charming kind of fantasy adventure type thing about these kids who've got this kind of imaginary world that they go to and have adventures in. And then there's this twist which is absolutely gut-wrenching, and I think he's never forgiven me for making him watch that film. I've subsequently, as he's got older, and he's nearly 14 now, we've let him watch, we control what he watches, but we've let him watch 18 rated films if I think, if I've watched them and I think they're appropriate. So he's seen his fair share of Arnie movies and things like that. And I do enjoy watching that sort of thing with him. We watched Aliens together a while ago, and that was a magical experience for me. But yeah, this is one film I didn't adequately research before letting him watch it. Right, bit more YA. So Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. So I really like this. I particularly enjoy the presentation of it. So it's got all these weird and wonderful kind of illustrations in it. It's not the best book in the world, but it is entertaining. It's got a great, it's kind of central concept about this. It's a lot. I always thought it was a lot like the X-Men in that it's about a school for gifted, weirdly gifted children, but with more of a kind of gothic horror bent in this one. So yeah, an enjoyable book. I've got, I think, the other 2 books in the trilogy, but I haven't read them yet. I really like the film as well. I thought quite often I find Tim Burton films a little bit annoying, but I thought that one was just really good fun. Right, another classic. So The Sword and the Stone by T.H. White, the first of his Arthur trilogy. I've got the other 2 books in this. I've got like a collected edition with all 3 books in it somewhere, and I do need to continue and read the other 2 books. But yeah, this was an absolute classic retelling of the Arthurian legend as kind of a kid's adventure book. So yeah, very good. And finally, I've saved the best till last. Now this is a much loved book that I had when I was a kid, which I had completely forgotten about until a few years ago. Some friends of ours gave this copy to my son as a Christmas present, or a mid-birthday present. I think it was a Christmas present. It's great. I loved this book when I was a kid. This is like an expanded edition of it, but basically it's a load of tips on how to be a spy. So things like how to avoid surveillance, and like how to do dead letter drops and things like that, and how to make a little code card that you keep in a matchbox. Just fantastic. I love this. Yeah, like animal prints and things like that. A really great book that really fired up my imagination as a kid, and probably got me outdoors more than I would have gone outdoors otherwise. So yeah, something a bit different there in terms of the selection of books, but I hope you enjoyed that nevertheless. As always, let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. Hope you are all safe and well, and I'll speak to you again soon. Cheerio.